This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Even on rewilding properties, planting natives is needed in some places. For example, for seed islands, property boundary planting, and low flammable green fabrics around buildings. Today's episode of Rewilding in Action is supported by Ribbonwood Nurseries that's based in Dunedin. I've planted hundreds of their trees, shrubs and ferns and been very happy with how well they've grown, as well as the knowledge and the friendliness of the owners and staff. You can contact Ribbonwood Nurseries through their website at ribbonwoodnurseries.co.nz or call them on 03 453 4673. Kia ora, ko Maureen Howard, toka inua. Welcome to Rewilding in Action. I'm Maureen Howard, the host of this podcast. In this episode, my guests David Orlovich, Matt Larcombe and Andy Nilsen, who are all from Otago University's botany department, and I are heading on a mini adventure in Bethunes Gully. We're hoping to find some original tawhai silver beech, Lophozonia menziesii, better known as Nothofagus menziesii. We think this patch is the closest remnant of silver beech to the centre of Dunedin. We've not come here solely to find some beautiful big trees, but also to talk about mycorrhizal fungi and how important they are in the natural succession of kānuka and mānuka as they transition to native beech. So please join us as we follow the track up the flank of Mount Cargill. We're at the bottom of Bethunes Gully and I've got Professor David Orlovich with me, who's a mycologist.
Yep, g'day.
And also Associate Professor Matt Larcombe, who is an evolutionary plant ecologist.
Kia ora.
And our guide for the day, very important because we're about to do some adventuring. Dr. Andy Nilsen, who's a research associate. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
So we're heading up to find some silver beech. And these are ones that are naturally here in Dunedin.
That's right. Pretty exciting, actually.
It is.
So it must be the closest native beech to town, is it?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware it is. It's one of the locations that everybody talks about as being a local remnant of forests that were here previously. Yep.
But the exciting thing about it, it's a little bit off track, isn't it? So we might have a little bit of bush bashing to do.
That's right. It's about 100 metres off the track from my calculations. So not too far, but it all depends on the terrain and the amount of gorse and other unpalatable plants that are there.
That's right. It could be a long 100 metres. Okay. Well, we're having a little bit of a breather on our way up the hill, and I thought this was a good time to actually ask what are mycorrhizal fungi, because one of the things that we want to know is to find out the role of mycorrhizal fungi in the natural succession of native forest. And really, first question is then, what are mycorrhizal fungi?
Well, maybe I can start with what is a mycorrhiza, because that is a word that was invented by a German scientist in the 1880s. It really means fungus root, and that's it, mycofungus rhiza root. And that describes a whole lot of different associations between roots and fungi. And so, it's a very handy term. It also encompasses a whole lot of quite unrelated things, so it can be a bit misleading to talk about mycorrhizas as if it's one thing. But the general thing about mycorrhizas is that they do often improve the growth of their host tree. So especially when trees are seedlings or plants are seedlings, and especially if there's a low nutrients in the soil, then under those two situations, having a fungus on the roots of the tree to help the roots do their job of taking up nutrients out of the soil is a benefit to many species.
Because when most people think of fungi, they think of the little fruiting body. Yep. But these mycorrhizal fungi, many of them don't even have a fruiting body, do they? It's to do with these networks.
Yep, that's right. The underground network or web of fungi that are I like to think of them as the interface between the soil and the trees and plants, and they can also connect different plant species together as well. So,
because we always have this idea that plants are competing with each other, but this is showing a different picture, isn't it?
Yep, and scientists do interpret that idea in different ways. So you can see, sometimes you can see it from a competition point of view, and other ways you could think of it as a collaboration point of view. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many fungi that do this job as well that it means these networks are very complex, and some fungi are able to associate with many different types of trees, and others will be more fussy about which trees they associate with. And some trees, you won't find certain fungi under them, but you will find others associated with them, and some fungi you can find associated with many different species.
And so the hyphae, these thread-like networks, they attach to the roots of the trees, don't they?
They do, and they attach in different ways, and that's really one of the ways you can define the different subtypes of mycorrhizae. So some of the fungi grow in between the root cells and actually invaginate or grow into the space inside the cell wall there. They don't penetrate the cell itself, but they form these little highly branched structures called arbuscules, and that's where the nutrients can get exchanged between the fungus and the plants, and the plant can send sugars down to the fungus as well. I think the plant actually usually thinks it's sending sugars to the root to grow, but then the fungus is in there saying, hey, I'd like a bit of that too, and then it takes it out, and then the fungus can benefit from that sugar. So that's one type of mycorrhiza, and that's known as the arbuscular mycorrhiza, and that's probably 80% of the plants on Earth form that type of mycorrhiza.
Right. So it's really interesting for us to know that, when we're out there planting trees, that under the ground are these mycorrhizal fungi, and it's something that we don't take into consideration.
No, and those ones you wouldn't even see. You need a microscope to dig up some soil. They do produce big spores that you can see with the naked eye, some of those, but no, typically those go unnoticed, but they're probably the most ecologically important. And again, it's interesting because some plants don't do them, and others do, and so these fungi can help to determine which plants can compete or grow more successfully in certain environments, depending on which other plants are growing around there. But when you are walking through a forest, especially in the autumn, where there are particular trees around, you may well see mushrooms coming up above the ground that are mycorrhizal fungi with those trees. And in New Zealand, our native species that do that are Nothofagus, or our southern beeches, and Leptospermum and kānuka and Kunzea. So, but Leptospermum and Kunzea is actually special because they can do both types of mycorrhizas.
Yes, so they can do these arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and the ectomycorrhizal fungi. They attach in a different way, don't they?
They do. The ectomycorrhizal fungi grow around the root, so they surround it, and you can see that with the naked eye. The ectomycorrhizas can be different colours depending on what species of fungus is growing on there. And they also grow in between the epidermal cells, or sometimes a bit deeper into the roots, but they don't form those little arbuscules or tree-like structures that the arbuscular mycorrhizae do. So, but again, that network of hyphae growing between the cells of the ectomycorrhizas is the site where nutrients are exchanged and the carbon gets into the fungus from the plant. So they sort of are functionally the same, but they go about it quite in different ways.
In different ways. Yeah. And as humans, we have to classify, don't we? So.
We do, yeah. And it is really helpful, but it also means a whole lot of explanation every time you try to explain it. Yeah.
That's right. Well, that was probably a good time. We've all caught our breath, and we're ready to proceed because we need to find these trees.
Right.
Okay. So we're just making our way up. We're on our 100 metres of off-track through this beautiful mixed podocarp forest with a lot of ferns underneath. It's actually quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty good going.
If we find them.
I'll just see if I can find it on my position on my map. It's actually very close and to our left.
Okay.
It's pretty close. I'd say 30 metres to the left.
Yeah. Passing through some beautiful big rimu here. This is magical in here.
Yes. Oh, we're moving around.
Yeah.
Gosh, The GPS is actually now it's telling me
Up that way.
it's that way. Wait.
This is how people get lost.
Good. You right, Andy?
I can see.
Okay, we're having a rest. We have found a mushroom, but not of the right kind.
Yeah.
Saprotrophic. Not on our list.
We found them!
Fantastic. Okay. So we're at the base of this big, beautiful silver beech tree, and
There's a Ganoderma under there. We should photograph a bracket fungus. It's actually a parasite, which isn't ideal for the tree. But anyway,
Probably means this tree's on its last few years.
is that right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's part of life.
it is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not much regeneration in this population, though.
So it's all being taken over by ferns and a mix of other broadleaves and one big beautiful remu. So how deep do the roots go and where do the mycorrhizal relationships happen?
Yep. Well, the roots of the whole root system of the tree is probably at least as extensive as the above ground parts of the tree. So that's the hidden half of the tree really. But the mycorrhizal roots are typically just under the leaf litter. So they're like what you might call feeder roots, and they're just under maybe the top 10 to 20 centimetres of the soil layer. Much lower than that, there's much less organic matter, and there'd be the roots would be more dedicated to water uptake and just anchoring the plant in place that were further down. But the mycorrhizal roots are just under the surface.
And so Andy, you'd been telling me what each is getting, what the mycorrhizae are getting and what the tree's getting.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a mutualistic relationship. So from the plant, the mycorrhizal fungi receive some sort of carbon, which they actually quite often will convert that into another form of carbon that the plant can't actually access. So they're sort of sequestering it for themselves. In return, the tree and plants receive phosphorus and a little bit of nitrogen and other micronutrients.
And water?
And, a little bit of water as well, I'd assume. Yep.
Yeah. And I guess they must have evolved somehow together. Or the fungi were here first, isn't that right? In the great evolution of things?
Fungi were here first, but there is certainly evidence that certain fungi, have a shared history of living with certain species of trees. So, but I mean, many of the fungi that are growing on the roots of these beech trees here are related to many of the fungi that are growing on the roots of other trees around the world. And so there are dozens of different genera of fungi. All of them have specialised to be ectomycorrhizal, and we can find our own endemic species of them here. Australia shares some of ours, but has their own suite of species as well. So yeah, there's a lot of diversity around the world, but we will find the same groups of fungi here that people might find in other countries as well.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. And there's so much more to learn, I'm sure. And Matt, so it brings me to what you and Marissa found.
Yeah, so it was a study by my master's student Marissa Strawson, who really wanted to understand this idea of whether or not mānuka and kānuka, which, as David mentioned before, are dual mycorrhizal, whether beech might be able to also use some of their mycorrhiza in a successional type process. So sort of the idea is using those as host plants in a grassland where there is no ectomycorrhizal fungi present, because they can use the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi that are in the grassland already, and you could then plant beech or sow beech into that environment, and they'd be able to establish with the ectomycorrhiza that have been attracted by the mānuka or kānuka. So Marissa did a study where she took soil from underneath mānuka and underneath beech, and she grew beech in both types of soil and mānuka in both types of soil, and looked at how they performed. And also we used DNA markers to look at what types of fungi were on the different roots from the different soil types. So we call it an inoculum. And we found that although there were distinct communities between the beech and the mānuka soil, there were a large number of taxa that overlapped in both communities. And we thought they were probably generalist species that might be able to associate with both. But there were also some signs that perhaps the beech performed slightly better in their own soil, so some sort of home soil advantage, but they could also certainly survive for the length of our experiment on those mānuka and kānuka species.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's all very significant because when, you've got a big slip, the species that are coming in are the mānuka and the kānuka.
Yep.
They are your pioneer species.
That's right, yeah.
And they're the ones that then set the conditions that allow a beech forest, but also allow a podocarp forest.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I guess the beech, if we're thinking specifically about beech, they tend to be really slow to recolonise areas, so having that helping hand might really be a benefit to them. And I think one thing that we probably should have mentioned right at the start is that the relationship between the beech and the ectomycorrhizal fungi is obligate, so they require each other. So one can't live without the other.
Oh, really?
So the ectomycorrhizal fungi are obligate on the beech, so they can't live without the beech. So once this beech tree here, this beautiful tree that we think is probably a bit sick because it's got a bracket fungus down the bottom, once that dies, and if these other trees die around here, the ectomycorrhizal fungi from this site will also go extinct here. Yeah.
And we're not seeing new seedlings coming up, are we?
No, I can't see any at the moment. Doesn't mean that there aren't any. We haven't had a real good look, but my understanding is that people do seem to think that this population is pretty static.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a bit sad.
It is sad, isn't it?
We don't want to have a sad rewilding story, but there are lessons to be learned, aren't they? And for me, one of them that I'm taking away is that those soil conditions are so important, in terms of the mycorrhizae that are in the soil if a beech forest is to get established.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They really. So that's the thing. It's, we have also done some research to show how far spores from the beech forest spread out into the grassland, and we found that there's a big drop off after about 30 metres. So there's about 30 metres out from the boundary. There's a big drop off in spore dispersal. So it's likely that the ectomycorrhizal fungi are not spreading very well into that area, but they probably do spread at a rate. It's not completely limiting, so they probably do spread to some degree out into the grassland, but we feel like it's probably low enough that it doesn't allow easy establishment.
Yeah, because we kind of have assumed that, perhaps the reasons that they haven't spread is because of seed dispersal or not being able to, get established in the exotic grass or whatever. But also we've got this mycorrhizal thing too.
That's right. It's almost certainly likely to be a combination of those factors. Yeah. So there probably is some competition effects with the grass. So grass is definitely a strong competitor. And another factor is that beech has evolved to be a shade-tolerant species, so the seedlings are established underneath the canopy, and they're not accustomed to establishing in the open, so they need some sort of shade in order to establish.
Yes.
So that's a real barrier for their establishment in the open as well. So the mānuka could provide that shade as well. Yeah.
I mean, one thing you were talking about earlier is that there's so much we don't know as well, and we don't know things about how these things can get established best and all the factors that feed into that. But the other thing that we don't know is what most of the fungi, like science hasn't really discovered most of the fungi that are on the roots of these trees as well. And people have estimated that we probably only know 20 or 25%. Scientists only know 20 or 25% of all the fungi that live in New Zealand. And so, when it comes to questions like what species are shared in mānuka versus beech fungi, or what are shared even between introduced trees and native trees. Like, if we only know 20% of this fungi, then we may well be missing things that are important in that picture too. So sometimes I have to confess, sometimes I just like worrying about the fungus and not the plant so much, but that's what can keep me busy, because there's so much there to be discovered. Yeah.
And this idea that you can buy a little inoculum. What do you think about these inoculum ideas?
There's a lot of different types of products, and I know you can buy things that are like one particular arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus species, and that might be valuable for one, big scale agriculture, but even then there's not a lot of evidence that it might do anything compared to conventional farming methods. But you can also buy, a mycorrhiza mix that is a mixture of arbuscular and ectomycorrhizas, and these things are imported, so they're not likely to be native species, but they might be common things that have may have been introduced here. But when you know about how the different types of mycorrhizas and what some trees like and some plants don't like, it really is like just a hodgepodge of things that you just, there's not really, I just wouldn't really have much confidence that it would do anything at all, really, yeah.
Well, it does bring money to the person who's
Well, that's the
selling
thing, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'm a bit sceptical of that, to be honest. And, I guess if you're in a situation where you have trees that are already established and have particular types of mycorrhizas, then planting new trees that are joining that part of a forest with newer areas so that you're using the inoculum that's already in a place, then that sort of would seem to me to be a better way to think about it. But that's all very situation dependent and depends, doesn't it?
Or we could leave it to Mother Nature and provide the conditions that help the forest spread.
That's right.
Yeah,
I think
naturally.
that's probably the safest solution, isn't it, really?
Yeah, because there's so much what we have to learn. Well, the three of you obviously absolutely love fungi. And trees. And trees on all of the plants.
Yeah.
But what is it that you love about them so much?
I think for me, it's their just intrinsic beauty, and I like to just be able to sit down on the ground and stare at it. A beautiful mushroom, and look at the colours and the incredibly fine, delicate structures that they have that you just don't notice when you're walking along a track and not spending the time. And they're just incredibly beautiful, and they're sort of underdog organisms, they're unappreciated, but they do an incredibly important job. They're nature's recyclers, the fungi.
And what about you, Matt? What do you love?
Well, I guess I've come to this relationship more from the tree angle, so I suppose, and honestly, working with David and Andy over the years has really opened up my eyes to the importance and fascination with fungi, but they're really the experts on the fungi. My interest is the trees, and like David, I'm just obsessed by beautiful forests. I've grown up in Tasmania and used to spend a lot of time in the bush there, and to me, being in the bush was being surrounded by plants, so I was just fascinated by plants, and the things that really grabbed my attention were the trees, and knowing what they were, seeing amazing different new trees and rare trees, and it was a reason to be there. Yeah.
And you, Andy, have you started with fungi?
Yeah, so I studied mycology, and just the mystique of them. They're very mysterious. They spend all their time underground, except for 1 week in the year where they finally pop up in fruit. So there's all this sort of hidden biodiversity that you don't really see and don't know about it, and it's just amazing.
Thanks very much to my guests, Professor David Orlovich, Associate Professor Matt Larcombe, and Dr. Andy Nilsen from the Botany Department for taking me on my most energetic episode so far. I'd love to have more episodes like this one. I'm especially grateful to them for being so generous with their time and for their considerable knowledge and passion for fungi and forests. In summary, most native trees in New Zealand form arbuscular mycorrhizal fungal relationships. However, our native beech species need ectomycorrhizal fungi to thrive, and if the beech trees die in an area, then their supporting mycorrhizal fungi species actually die too. Mānuka and kānuka could come to the rescue. Both are pioneer species that are in their element colonising bare ground, and both species form both arbuscular as well as ectomycorrhizal fungal relationships. Marissa Straussine's excellent master's thesis that she did partly under Matt's supervision showed that beech seedlings grown in the surface soil or the inoculum of Mānuka forest developed ectomycorrhizal fungal associations almost as well as the soil inoculum of beech forest. So this suggests that Mānuka forest is able to provide the right sort of fungi for beech trees to get established and thrive in. And of course, as a pioneer scrubland species, Mānuka forest also provides the shelter and the semi-shade needed by young beech to establish. So what I'm learning about mycorrhizal fungi supports the passive rewilding approach of allowing nature to lead the successional process, where possible, over planting. So thank you for listening to Rewilding in Action. I'm Maureen Howard. If you enjoyed this episode, be so fantastic if you can share it with anyone you know who you think might be interested. In my next episode, I talk with Graham Corbishley about pig elimination over 22,000 hectares of Banks Peninsula. And this is an important episode because even at pretty low levels, pigs seriously disturb the forest floor and they interrupt natural regeneration here in New Zealand. And it's so impressive that Graham has developed a successful approach to eliminate this invasive species. And from the feedback I'm getting, I think this will be an episode that many of you have been looking forward to hearing. So until then, I'll leave you with some birdsong from Bethunes Gully, close to the huge Silver Beech, found by David, Matt and Andy, rewilders who are letting nature take the lead.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.